after proving himself in the field of battle as a remarkable commander, after showing everybody that he was also a great diplomat, William had to start thinking about his succession. And mm, unusual as it may sound for the Middle Ages, evidence indicates that the young duke was quite a chaste man until he met the daughter of the Count of Flanders, Baldwin the Fifth. And she was quite a remarkable woman because Matilda, on her father's side, was a descendant of Alfred the Great. Her mom was the daughter of the King of France, Robert II. So, what else do we know about this high-born woman, the Duke of Normandy, that set his eyes on?
Well, you've named one of her major assets, which is her bloodlines. Um, Now, it's hard to tell whether he was thinking about the Anglo-Saxon connection as early as this. He may have been keeping it in the back of his mind, who knows? But it was the French connection, I think, that was really important. But we should not neglect the Flemish connection, because Flanders was an extremely important territory. Uh, just because there's not a modern country called Flanders now, uh, I think that leads people to neglect how important Flanders was in the Middle Ages. Hugely important economically, uh, kind of a hinge between the Empire and France, uh, and a key ally um, on the Atlantic seaboard of Europe. So an alliance with Flanders would have made a lot of sense to William. And Matilda clearly was personally a formidable woman. She was somebody he felt very comfortable leaving Normandy, leaving in charge of Normandy for extended periods of time later on, uh, which wasn't the case for every queen or duchess or whatever, but he definitely trusted her. They seem to have had a very good relationship. Uh, the only thing that they are renowned to have fought over was their errant eldest son, Robert Curthose. So they did argue about him because his mother had a soft spot for him, and his father thought he was really an idiot. And not only an idiot, but a rebellious idiot. So they did fight over that, but otherwise they seem to have been very, very close and have had, in fact, quite a loving partnership. And that's frankly unusual in royal marriages in this period to have actually what we might think of as a real functional marriage.
Well, as the story goes, Matilda was horrified at the prospect of becoming the Duke's wife and initially refused to marry him. Certain historians might even argue that she only had eyes for Brithric, that wealthy ambassador sent by King Edward to her father's court and probably one of the richest men in England at the time. Well, infuriated by the scorn with which Matilda had treated his proposal, it is said William got on his horse, rode to Lille, and upon arrival, he seized the young Flemish princess by her long hair and gave her quite a vicious beating. So, if one is to trust the 14th century chroniclers, this rough wooing led to a total change of heart in Matilda's case. In your opinion, is there maybe a grain of truth in all this, or should we consider it just the later mythologizing?
I'm happy to say that that story is not true because it would reflect very badly on both of them if it were. Um, the idea that Matilda only really appreciated William's worth when he showed her who was boss is offensive even by medieval standards. Um, it's not true. The first time we come across that story is in the 13th century, which is suspicious in itself, and it was probably a part of a satirical text. So I don't think there's any truth in it. The story about the Anglo-Saxon ambassador is quite interesting, though, because there is a kernel of truth that seems to have been elaborated into this later legend about his this unrequited love for the Anglo-Saxon. Um, what was probably really the case is that Matilda was given the lands of this man after the conquest. So, what happens after the Norman conquest is that there is a parceling out of estates to many of William's supporters, including his most important supporter, his wife. And we have records of whose lands people got. And this is in Doomsday Book. You can look it up. And they're called the antecessores. Okay, so an antecessor in this case is the person who had the land before you. And this man, Bertrand, was actually the antecessor of Matilda. We have no idea if they met each other, uh, but what we do know is that she got his land later, and this was later elaborated into the story that she had confiscated the land. It's That's not true. She just got his land in the end. He might have been dead long since.
Well, although it is unlikely we will ever determine the exact date of their wedding, William and Matilda got married sometime between 1051 and 1053. They seem to have been ideal partners for each other. They had 9 or 10 children, and even more surprising for those times, neither had any extramarital affairs. Uh,
Not that we know of.
Exactly, none that we know about. Historians have always considered that this must have been a consequence of the Duke's own bastardy. Is it possible that we got everything wrong, and maybe Robert and Herleva lived a brief but true love story, which had nothing unusual for those days, and this may have fascinated William instead of actually having had a traumatizing effect on him?
It's we can only speculate, alas. Um, this is where if I had any novelistic gifts, I would definitely want to delve into what his what his early memories would have been like, because by the time little William would have been uh, conscious of his family relationships, his mother would have been already remarried or married to her eventual legitimate husband. So he would have not grown up seeing his parents as a functional couple. Uh, there would have never been something really regular about his home life in the way that we would imagine a modern nuclear family. Um, so it's hard to tell exactly why he ended up making this very successful marriage with Matilda, but he went through a lot to make it happen because there was opposition to the marriage. It just didn't come from Matilda.